My father gave the family business to my lazy brother instead of me. A month later, he nearly killed a client with an allergy, and now Dad is begging me to come back and fix it. A little over a month ago, at 28, I threw Dad a retirement party. He was stepping down as manager of our family restaurant, which he'd run nearly his entire life. Now 62, he said he was too tired and wanted to pass the business to the next generation. Naively, I assumed he meant me. I dedicated the last 5 years of my life to that restaurant. My family owns a chain of Italian restaurants, with 2 other locations in the city, one managed by my uncle and the other by his daughter. But our restaurant is the most popular, and Dad is its sole owner. For context, my uncle isn't Dad's biological brother. It all started when my grandfather opened the first restaurant with my grandmother, running it for years until Dad inherited it. The business grew, and we opened 2 more in different parts of the city. That's when my uncle stepped in. He quit his job to manage one of the new restaurants, and when we opened the second, his daughter became its manager. Thus, the business has always stayed in the family. When Dad announced his retirement a few weeks before the party, I was certain he'd hand the reins to me. My uncle couldn't claim it. He's about Dad's age, maybe a couple of years younger, and planning his own retirement soon. His daughter, who'd managed the other restaurant for just 2 years, lacked my experience. I'd worked in the family business for 5 years, starting at 23 after leaving a corporate job to work with Dad. I hoped to inherit the business and elevate it to new heights of success. I considered myself the obvious candidate. Uncle was retiring, my cousin was too inexperienced, and that left me. Dad never explicitly said he'd pass it to me, and that was my mistake. I never demanded guarantees or formalized anything. I just assumed I'd be the next manager. However, at his farewell party, he dropped a bombshell, announcing he was handing the business to my spoiled younger brother. I have 2 brothers, Charles, 34, who never cared for the restaurant business and chose medicine. He's a surgeon, and Derek, 26, who's interested in nothing and does nothing all day. He's a hopeless, lazy bum, and no one in the family likes him. I don't mind that he's unproductive or unsuccessful, but his attitude is the problem. He's achieved nothing in life yet acts like he deserves the best. Our parents are to blame. They've coddled him. Whenever Charles or I try to set him straight, they stop us, saying he needs support to find his calling and avoid becoming a parasite living off them forever. A few years ago, he graduated college, but since then, he's been fired from at least 5 jobs. He never lasts anywhere due to his awful personality. I don't know where his confidence comes from, but he acts like he's on par with God, and no one can criticize him. We're forced to tolerate it because he's family, but in the real world, no one, especially employers, puts up with that behavior, so it's no surprise he gets fired from every job. After a couple of months, he has no special skills, and his previous jobs were arranged by Dad through connections. He can't do anything independently. He's a huge problem, but doesn't even realize it. For the last 2 years, after being fired from his last job, he's just sat at home, living off our parents. The worst part is he feels no shame or embarrassment, which is infuriating because our parents do nothing about it and only enable him. It's especially unfair since they constantly push Charles and me toward success. I don't want to sound ungrateful. We're both set in life, but it's still frustrating to see them so lenient with Derek. In short, he's a spoiled brat, and I can't stand him. We were good friends as kids, but since high school, everything changed, and now I don't get along with Derek at all. Plus, he has 0 experience in business and no clue how it works, so it shocked everyone when Dad announced he was passing the business to him. Dad had informed us of his retirement a couple of months before the party. Everyone, staff and family, knew. As someone who'd been his right hand in the restaurant for 5 years, I naturally expected to take over after he left. We'd never discussed it directly, and I deeply regret that. I took it for granted, and maybe that was my error. In a few conversations, Dad mentioned things he wanted me to handle after his retirement, and I saw it as a sign. If he's talking about my future duties, he must intend to leave the business to me. It never crossed my mind he might do otherwise. I trusted Dad. He'd never given me reason to think differently. Sure, he always treated Derek specially, but that didn't mean he treated me poorly. He always loved and respected me as a daughter and employee. So when he announced his decision to retire, I organized a farewell party without even considering he hadn't named his successor. To me, it was obvious. Then came the party day, and he said he was handing management to Derek. I was in shock. Not just me, everyone was baffled, from staff to our mother. No one expected this. Everyone assumed it'd be me. I'd worked my tail off in that restaurant for 5 years, perfecting everything, and after 5 years of hard work, the business goes to Derek? It didn't compute. I only fully grasped it when Dad called Derek over, and he accepted with a smug grin. I couldn't take it. I ran out of the restaurant in tears. The pain was unbearable. A few minutes later, Dad came out to explain. I was furious but decided to hear him out. Honestly, his reasoning was as foolish as the decision itself. He admitted Derek's a hopeless layabout, that for 2 years he tried to get him to find a job, but Derek did nothing. So, he thought putting him in a position of responsibility, like managing the restaurant, might force him to change. Dad hoped that since it was now his own business, Derek would treat it differently, work harder, and take it seriously, or at least stop lounging around. But the most insulting part? He asked me to stay at the restaurant and essentially keep doing what I'd done for him, but now for Derek. Basically, he wanted me to be the real manager while Derek was just the figurehead. It was a slap in the face. He was asking me to babysit someone who had no idea how to run a business, while I'd long proven my competence. I told Dad he had 2 options. Either he reverses his decision and gives the restaurant to me, or he loses me forever. We had a serious fight. He said I was being selfish and not thinking about Derek's future. I shot back that he wasn't thinking about mine. In the end, I cut ties with him. He refused to back down, and I wasn't about to work for Derek. After that, I never returned to the restaurant. That was my last day there. A month has passed, and I haven't stepped foot in the place. I still talk to Mom and Charles, but we never discuss the restaurant. They know how things are there but understand it's a sore topic for me and don't bring it up. Until recently, I had no idea what was happening at the restaurant after that fight. I stopped talking to Dad, and I never spoke to Derek anyway, so nothing changed on that front. I started applying for other jobs after leaving the restaurant. I had savings and decided to live off them until I found something suitable. I'd even planned a trip next week. But now I'm not sure that'll happen, because I might have to return to the restaurant. As I predicted, my brother screwed up big time. He had no clue how to manage the restaurant, but for some reason, Dad thought the best strategy was to give him full freedom to build trust and confidence. Clearly, Derek's feelings mattered more than the family business or common sense. Since he took over, he's made a bunch of irresponsible and stupid financial decisions. But the real disaster came when he decided to cut costs on ingredients. Our restaurant also serves vegans. We have a separate vegan menu and strictly ensure no cross-contamination, with a dedicated kitchen zone for those dishes. But Derek dismantled that zone to free up space and started substituting vegan ingredients to save money. It was only a matter of time before a customer exposed him, and a couple of days ago, it happened. Derek ordered kitchen staff to use regular cow's milk instead of the more expensive soy milk whenever possible. That's incredibly dangerous. This idiot forgot that some people are vegan for a reason and have allergies to dairy. I bet you can guess what happened. A customer ordered a dessert with milk, but specifically requested soy or another alternative. If an experienced staff member had made it, they'd have ignored Derek's orders and followed the customer's request. But unfortunately, Derek hired a new, inexperienced worker and strictly ordered him to ensure no one defied his instructions. It seems Derek wasn't as dumb as he looked. He suspected staff were sabotaging his orders since alternative milk supplies ran out fast, so he hired this new guy as a snitch. This snitch ignored the customer's request and used regular milk. As a result, the customer had a severe allergic reaction and is now threatening to sue the restaurant. I learned about this from Dad. He called me the evening of the incident, clearly panicked. He said he fired Derek the moment he found out what he'd been doing behind his back, and now wants me to return and take the role I originally wanted. It was absurd. Now that Derek had ruined everything, Dad suddenly changed his mind. What I predicted came true, and now he's begging me to come back. I was still angry and hurt from what happened a month ago, so I just laughed when I heard this. Then I told Dad I'd never return unless he publicly apologized to me in front of all the staff and family, just as he publicly humiliated me at the party. He should admit his mistake, announce Derek's firing, and officially appoint me to the role. I don't think I'm asking for anything unreasonable. What he did was unacceptable, and I have every right to demand he fix it. Now that Dad needs me, he should prove he recognizes his error. But my mom thinks I'm going overboard, and even Dad said during the call he'd never do that. He claimed the restaurant belongs to me as much as to him, and that, yes, he might have made a mistake, but my demand for a public apology is excessive and humiliating. Well, if he wants me back after choosing Derek over me, he should ask me publicly. Update 1. Hi everyone. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my last post, offering advice and support. It means a lot to know you care about my situation. Thank you so much. Now, about my decision. I took a few days to think and decided to return to the business. It wasn't easy. I had to swallow my pride, but in the end, I've given 5 years of my life to this, and no matter what happened, I can't change the fact that I want to run this business. I don't want it to fall apart, especially since I know Dad won't be around forever. Charles, as I said, isn't interested in the restaurant, and Derek is obviously incapable of managing anything, let alone a business. That leaves me. There are no other options. I also talked to my uncle and cousin, who manage the other 2 restaurants, and they think I should return too. They're convinced this restaurant is rightfully mine, and if Dad's asking me back, I should let go of past grudges and take control. I love this restaurant and don't want to watch it crumble. It's that simple. Honestly, I'd love for Dad to apologize publicly, but I don't want to turn it into a show or gloat to prove I was right about Derek. That won't bring me joy compared to the satisfaction of seeing the restaurant succeed. This time, I've decided to let it go. It's in my best interest. This morning, I talked to Dad. It was a strictly formal and calm conversation. We agreed to leave our disagreements in the past and address them later, as our priority now is resolving the current crisis. We scheduled a meeting with our lawyers and the affected client to reach an out-of-court settlement, since she's been posting about us on social media. So far, we're lucky her posts haven't gained much traction, but that could change anytime. We need to contain this scandal before it escalates. Update 2. Yesterday, I met Dad in person for the first time in a long while, right before negotiations with the client. We discussed all the details with our lawyer. It was strange to see him after weeks apart. I'd seen him nearly every day for 5 years, and I didn't realize how much I missed him until now. We barely talked because the lawyer dominated the conversation, and we had to listen closely, but I felt there was still much left unsaid between us. Now wasn't the time to address it. Dad didn't apologize for what happened a month ago, or bring it up, but the atmosphere between us was polite and even slightly warm. It was our first meeting since that big fight, and I expected it to be awkward, but thankfully, it wasn't. After the meeting, he invited me home to see Mom, whom I hadn't seen since that fateful evening, but I declined because I had plans. I was invited to a friend's engagement party. By the way, I asked Dad if Derek still lived with them, and it turns out he doesn't. I was curious about what happened and where he went, but Dad clearly didn't want to discuss it, so I didn't push. Later, I asked Charles if he knew anything, and he said Derek moved out a few days after being fired, but it's unclear if it was his choice or if our parents kicked him out. So, that question remains open, but I'll definitely ask Dad what really happened. As for the meeting with the client, it went reasonably well. I expected it to be harder, given how serious the situation was. Such ethical breaches wouldn't have happened if Dad or I had been in charge. However, the client was reasonable. She explained the only reason she threatened a lawsuit and complained so actively on social media wasn't the incident itself, but how the manager treated her. Instead of admitting the mistake, he blamed her, saying she hadn't warned about her allergy or specified soy milk. That's what set her off. We fully realized what an idiot Derek was when we learned all the details. Before, the client refused to discuss it without her lawyer and hinted at her mistreatment in her posts, but avoided specifics, fearing a defamation countersuit. In the end, it was her word against Derek's, and he even tried to intimidate her, demanding she delete her posts, claiming she was lying and threatening legal action. That's why she couldn't reveal all the details. Dad and I couldn't see the full picture because the waiter who took the order feared losing his job and backed Derek's version. I don't blame him. People cling to their jobs and sometimes have to cover for management. The new employee Derek hired naturally sided with him too, insisting the waiter never mention soy milk, so the client was at fault, allegedly trying to profit from the scandal. Ultimately, we explained to the client that the culprit was fired and management had changed. We assured her it wouldn't happen again. Thankfully, we reached an out-of-court settlement. She promised to delete her posts and drop the matter. We lost a significant amount of money, but at least the problem Derek caused is resolved. Now Dad and I can breathe a little. Update 3. A month has passed since I returned to the restaurant, and honestly, I've never been happier. It took this time to realize how miserable I was without this work. Yes, I had disagreements with Dad, but this restaurant is my life, and I want to grow it further, and I will. As for Dad, we're working on rebuilding our relationship, and we've made significant progress. I've reconnected closely with my parents, and we decided as a family to spend much more time together. A couple of weeks ago, I had a heart-to-heart with Dad, and he admitted he and Mom deeply regret how they treated me and Charles. They always knew Derek was the weak link in our family, and were just trying to bring him up to our level so he wouldn't feel inferior, but in the end, they only inflated his ego to the point where he thought he was great without ever trying to achieve anything. So, his firing was a blow to his pride, and he decided to move out. Since then, he hasn't spoken to anyone in the family, but Dad learned through acquaintances that Derek's living with a friend and working at a local video game store. At least he's doing something, which is a start. Every week, our family gathers for dinner, including Charles and his wife. Derek's been invited a few times. It'd be rude not to, but he doesn't respond. That's his choice, and I don't really care. I wish him luck, but don't want anything to do with him. Time with family has done me good, and I'm finally repairing things with Dad. I enjoy it. Lately, life has really improved, and I have nothing to complain about. I'm back to doing what I love and building what I believe in. I don't think I could ask for more, and most importantly, I'm in good standing with my family again. It seems that's all I need for happiness.